A 22-year-old physics student, no medical degree, no training, walked into a university library one afternoon. He sat down with a medical textbook, and in a few hours, he diagnosed a case that an entire hospital full of physicians couldn't crack. The doctors had memorized every disease in their textbooks. They could recite symptoms, name conditions, write prescriptions. But when a patient showed up who didn't match the textbook, they froze. They didn't know how to think. They only knew how to remember. That physics student was Richard Feynman. The patient was the woman he'd been in love with since he was 15, and she was dying while doctors argued over a diagnosis they'd eventually get wrong 3 times. This is the story of how a man with zero medical training proved, with his own wife's medical chart, that the people we trust with our lives had memorized medicine, but never understood it. And the medical profession is only now starting to admit it. Her name was Arlene Greenbaum. The trouble started with a lump on her neck. It would appear, then disappear, then come back. Her uncle, a licensed physician, told her to rub it with omega oil. That was his medical opinion, for what turned out to be a fatal disease. When things got worse, fevers, swelling, pain, a second doctor admitted her to the hospital and declared it typhoid fever. Full quarantine, special gowns, the whole procedure. Feynman did what Feynman always did. He went and looked things up. He found that typhoid had a definitive test, the Weddell test. Checks for bacteria. Clear result, yes or no. So he asked the doctor a simple question. How did the Weddell test come out? It was negative. Feynman pushed back. Why the quarantine? Why the gowns? Why are you treating her for a disease your own test says she doesn't have? The doctor didn't answer him. Instead, he went to Arlene's parents and complained, and the family told Feynman to back off. After all, he's the doctor. You're only her fiancé. Years later, Feynman wrote about this in What Do You Care What Other People Think? His words. I've found out since that such people don't know what they're doing and get insulted when you make some suggestion or criticism. Think about what just happened. A test came back negative. The doctor ignored his own test. A 22-year-old kid with a library card pointed it out. And the doctor's response wasn't to reconsider. It was to call the kid's parents. But Feynman didn't stop there. Arlene improved for a while. Then the swelling came back. Armpits, groin, everywhere. The lymph nodes. A new doctor examined her. Lymphatic disease, he said. But which one? He didn't know. So Feynman walked into the Princeton Library. He pulled out the textbooks on lymphatic diseases and started from the top. Tuberculosis of the lymphatic glands. The book said, this is very easy to diagnose. So he ruled it out. If it were easy, the doctors would have found it by now. That logic made perfect sense at the time. It would turn out to be the biggest mistake he ever made. He kept going. Lymphodenema, lymphodenoma, Hodgkin's disease, all cancers of one form or another. And then he noticed something in the medical literature that stopped him cold. He later described it in his own words. The only difference between lymphodenema and lymphodenoma was, as far as I could make out by reading it very carefully, that if the patient dies, it's lymphodenoma. If the patient survives, at least for a while, then it's lymphodenema. 2 different names, same disease. The only variable was whether you ended up in a coffin or not. And this was the terminology trained physicians used to navigate life and death decisions. Feynman concluded the most likely explanation was incurable disease. He told Arlene, mentioned Hodgkin's by name. When Arlene next saw her doctor and asked, "Could it be Hodgkin's?" the doctor said, "Well, yes, that's a possibility." Then she went to the county hospital. And the attending physician wrote the following on her chart: Hodgkin's disease, ? A trained physician wrote a question mark after his own diagnosis. A physics student, reading the same textbooks in a library, had arrived at the same level of certainty. The difference was the student didn't pretend to know more than he did. Feynman's reaction, in his own words: "So I realized that the doctor didn't know any more than I did about this problem." But the most devastating moment in this entire story happened at a meeting nobody talks about. The hospital called a special session to discuss Arlene's case. After the meeting, a nurse wheeled Arlene into the hallway where Feynman was waiting. And then a small man came running out of the meeting room, out of breath. He caught up to them and asked Arlene a single question. "Tell me, do you spit up blood? Have you ever coughed up blood?" The nurse turned on him. "Go away! What kind of thing is that to ask a patient?" She looked at Feynman and Arlene and explained. "That man is a doctor from the neighborhood who comes to the meetings and is always making trouble." Feynman wrote 3 words about this moment. "I didn't catch on." Coughing blood. That's a textbook symptom of tuberculosis, the disease Arlene actually had. That troublemaking doctor was the only person in that entire hospital asking the right question. And the system silenced him, brushed him off, called him a nuisance, because his question didn't match the official theory. After more deliberation, the hospital settled on Hodgkin's disease. Fatal. No cure. A doctor pulled Feynman aside, gave him the prognosis, then said, "We're going to tell her it's glandular fever." Feynman refused. "We've already discussed the possibility of Hodgkin's disease. I know she can adjust to it." The doctor shook his head. "Her parents don't want her to know. You had better talk to them first." What followed was an ambush. His parents, his aunts, the family doctor, all of them saying he was a foolish young man who would destroy this wonderful girl by telling her the truth. And then his sister, 11 years old, came up to him with tears pouring down her face. She beat him on the chest, told him Arlene was too good, too beautiful for this kind of pain. That broke him. He wrote Arlene a goodbye letter. If she ever discovered he'd lied, they were through. He carried it in his pocket everywhere. He went to the hospital. Arlene sat up in bed, surrounded by her parents. She looked at him and said, "Now I know how valuable it is that we tell each other the truth. They're telling me I have glandular fever, and I'm not sure whether I believe them or not. Tell me, Richard, do I have Hodgkin's disease or glandular fever?" He said, "You have glandular fever." And he died inside. 1 week later, she called him. "Richard, I want to talk to you. Come on over." He made sure the letter was in his pocket. He walked into her room. She said, "Sit down." Then she looked him in the eye. "All right, now tell me, do I have glandular fever or Hodgkin's disease?" "You have Hodgkin's disease." And he reached for the letter. Her first words, after being told she had a fatal illness, were not about dying. "God, they must have put you through hell." She was worried about him. And then she said something that defined their entire relationship. "You should have stuck by it. We know what we're doing. We are right." The final diagnosis came months later. It wasn't Hodgkin's disease either. It was lymphatic tuberculosis, probably from unpasteurized milk. Every single doctor got it wrong. The uncle with his omega oil, the specialist who treated a negative test result, the hospital that wrote a question mark. All of them. And the small doctor who asked about blood in her cough, the one they called a troublemaker. He was the closest to the truth. The system dismissed him. And Arlene paid the price. She died on June 16, 1945. She was 25 years old. The clock in her room stopped at 9:21. Most people would call that a sign from beyond. Feynman knew the clock was fragile. He'd repaired it before. The nurse probably picked it up to check the time in the dim light and disturb the mechanism. Even in that moment, sitting next to the body of the woman he loved, his instinct was to look for the real answer, not the comforting one. It took Feynman years to make sense of what happened to Arlene. The grief faded slowly. The anger never did. Because what haunted him wasn't just the loss. It was the gap he'd seen between what the doctors knew and what they understood. And that gap kept showing up everywhere he looked. At Princeton, he took a graduate biology class. His first assignment involved the nervous system of a cat. He went to the library and asked the librarian for a map of the cat. She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "A map of the cat, sir? You mean a zoological chart?" Rumors spread about some idiot biology student looking for a map of the cat. When he gave his presentation, he started by drawing the cat and naming the muscles. The biology students, 4 years of training under their belts, interrupted him. "We know all that!" His response, from "Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman." "Oh, you do? Then no wonder I can catch up with you so fast after you've had 4 years of biology." They had wasted all their time memorizing stuff like that when it could be looked up in 15 minutes. 4 years, 15 minutes. Same facts. The difference? Those students had memorized the map. Feynman understood the territory, and he'd seen that exact gap at Arlene's bedside. Doctors who could name every disease but couldn't think when a real patient didn't match a textbook page. In 1974, he gave this pattern a name. At the Caltech commencement, he described something he called cargo cult science. During World War II, islanders in the South Pacific watched American soldiers build airstrips. Planes landed, supplies arrived. After the soldiers left, the islanders wanted the planes to come back. So they built their own runways out of sticks, carved wooden headphones for the controllers, lit fires along the sides. Everything looked exactly right, but no planes ever landed. Feynman's point was brutal. You can follow every ritual of science, the white coats, the degrees, the studies, the peer reviews, and still have nothing. Because you skip the part that actually matters. Understanding why something works, not just knowing that it does. And he delivered the line that cuts through everything. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. He wasn't talking about frauds. He was talking about sincere, well-meaning professionals who genuinely believe they understand because they memorize the answers, and never questioned whether memorizing is the same as knowing. That was 1974. Here's what happened 52 years later. In the winter of 2026, just weeks ago, the American Academy of Ophthalmology published an editorial in their journal. The title? Cargo Cult Science. A medical journal. In 2026. Using a physicist's exact words from 1974 to describe what's happening inside modern medicine right now. The editorial pointed to what researchers call a replication crisis. Published medical studies, peer-reviewed, credentialed, official, that collapse the moment anyone tries to repeat them. They cited Feynman directly. They wrote that cargo cult science puts on the appearances of science, but does not produce results that others can reliably build upon. That wasn't a physics professor saying this. That was doctors about their own profession. That same year, JAMA Network Open reviewed 309 health videos on YouTube, all made by licensed physicians. The result? Fewer than 1 in 5 were backed by strong scientific evidence. 2 out of 3 had low or no evidence at all. And here's the part that should worry you. The videos with the weakest evidence attracted the most viewers. And right now, on the Student Doctor Network, the largest online forum for medical students, you can read posts from students inside the system saying things like, "The amount of garbage to memorize in medical school is absolutely astounding." And, "This is not a profession for the thinking type." These aren't outsiders criticizing medicine. These are the people being trained right now. And they know something is wrong. Many of them are surviving their own training by using something called the Feynman technique, a method built by a physicist, not a doctor. Because the system that's supposed to teach them medicine is teaching them to memorize it instead. In 1966, Feynman said it as clearly as anyone ever has. His exact words, published in The Pleasure of Finding Things Out: "Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts." Not contempt for doctors, not rebellion against medicine, just the quiet, uncomfortable principle that a credential is not the same thing as comprehension. And the only way to know if someone truly understands is to ask them why. Then it happened to Feynman himself. 1978. He's 60 years old, happy, married to Gwyneth, 2 kids, teaching at Caltech where students practically worshipped him. And then, abdominal pains that wouldn't go away. Doctors found a tumor, not a small one, 6 pounds, the size of a football, a rare cancer called myxoid liposarcoma. It had already crushed his left kidney and destroyed his spleen. Some of his colleagues suggested the cancer was caused by radiation. That morning in 1945, when he watched the Trinity bomb test through nothing but a truck windshield. He was the only person who refused the protective goggles, reasoning that the glass would block the ultraviolet. Feynman wouldn't accept the radiation theory, not because it was frightening, because the evidence wasn't strong enough. A theory that fits a good story is not the same as a theory supported by data. That distinction, the one between a satisfying explanation and a true one, was exactly what the doctors at Arlene's hospital never grasped. Over the next 10 years, he fought 2 different cancers, the liposarcoma and later Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, multiple surgeries. During one operation, he lost so much blood that he nearly died on the table. He was saved by a campus-wide blood drive, Caltech students and faculty lining up to keep him alive. Through all of it, he never stopped working, never stopped thinking. He taught his last class 2 weeks before he died. In February of 1988, a ruptured duodenal ulcer destroyed his kidneys. Doctors told him dialysis could give him a few more months. Maybe. Feynman evaluated the offer the way he evaluated everything. What would those months look like? How much pain? How much capacity to think, to work, to be himself? He weighed the evidence, and he made a decision. He refused. Not out of despair, not because he'd given up, because he understood what those months would actually cost, and he decided the price wasn't worth paying. His last words? "I'd hate to die twice. It's so boring." He died on February 15th, 1988. He was 69 years old. Feynman spent a decade relying on doctors. He respected the work. What he never respected was the system behind it. The uncle with his omega oil, the specialist who ignored his own test, the hospital that wrote a question mark, the nurse who silenced the one doctor asking the right question. None of them were bad people. They were trained to match patterns from memory, and left helpless the moment a patient didn't match. You've seen this, maybe not in a hospital, but in a meeting room, in a classroom. Every time someone with credentials couldn't answer a simple why, and got offended when you asked. The question Feynman left behind isn't whether this is still happening. The journals confirmed it 3 weeks ago. The medical students confirm it every day. The question is simpler and harder. Can the person treating you explain why, or can they only tell you what? Because Feynman's first principle still holds. You must not fool yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool. The doctors never understood that. He did.